Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being with us at this time on a weekend to participate in this press conference of the UNSMIL. We have here the great pleasure to host Mrs. Stephanie Turco-Williams, who is, as you know, acting special representative of the Secretary General and head of the UN support mission in Libya. Mrs. Williams will deliver some initial remarks, and then we will take questions and answers. Please let me remind you that on channel 2 of the live webcast that you can watch on webtv.un.org.
Excuse me, I cannot hear her.
Interpretation.
No.
On a Saturday evening. Over the past months, and under the umbrella of the United Nations, Libyans have come together to build bridges within and across the various tracks of the Berlin process in order to genuinely tackle the issues that have driven Libya's long-standing conflict, including the armed conflict itself, its economic roots, the political crisis and division, and the need for accountability, transitional justice, and reconciliation. This is a Libyan process. It is not being brokered by foreign powers in smoke-filled rooms in faraway capitals. The roadmap that was charted in Tunis in November is the first critical step to renew the political legitimacy of Libyan institutions and to restore their sovereignty through the holding of national elections on December 24th of this year. Through the roadmap, the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum also agreed clear steps leading to these elections that shall be held on an agreed-upon constitutional basis. And the roadmap set out a very reasonable time frame for the politicians and the relevant institutions to live up to their responsibility to complete these steps, with built-in contingencies in the event that the institutions fail or impede the process. In Tunis, the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum also agreed on the need to restructure the executive authority to govern Libya in the run-up to these elections. This new, unified government would be tasked with putting in place the necessary conditions for the elections to take place. It would also launch national reconciliation. It would seek to combat corruption and restore the delivery of public services across the country. As you know, we have convened the advisory committee of the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum here in Geneva since Wednesday. With us here is a group of 18 members selected and indeed nominated from within the broader group of the 75 composing the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum. This is an advisory committee formed to overcome the deadlock on the mechanism for the selection mechanism for this temporary executive authority, in line with the Tunis roadmap agreed upon in mid-November. I'm very pleased to report that the advisory committee members truly rose to the occasion, and they've met their responsibility with a constructive spirit, cooperative efforts, and a great deal of patriotism. During these deliberations, I've witnessed a spirit of fraternity, solidarity, and a commitment to put the interests of the country and the Libyan people first and foremost. I wish to extend my heartfelt thanks to the advisory committee members for their efforts and to the rest of the dialogue members for their continued support during these consultations. I'm happy to announce, and I congratulate them, on reaching an agreement on a recommended selection mechanism that has now been shared with the remaining members of the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum earlier this afternoon. The plenary will vote on this mechanism on Monday. They have taken, indeed, a decisive step towards meeting the goals that were set in Tunis. On the basis of the proposal devised by the advisory committee, each electoral college shall separately nominate their respective representative to the Presidency Council based on the principle of agreement in selection 70%. If this is not possible, lists shall be formed from all regions. Each list shall consist of 4 persons who will specify the position for which they are running, i.e., President of the Presidency Council, Member of the Presidency Council, or Prime Minister. In order for the list to be presented for voting by the plenary, it must receive 17 endorsements, 8 from the West, 6 from the East, and 3 from the South. The winning list shall be the one that receives 60% of the votes of the plenary in the first round. If none of the lists receive this percentage, the 2 lists that receive the highest percentage shall compete in the second round. The winning list in that round shall be the one that receives 50% plus 1 in the plenary. I believe this decision reached today is the best possible compromise, as this proposal respects the regional dimension, and it indeed encourages people to work across the divide and across regions in order to strengthen understanding and to build unity in the country. And it embodies the principles of full inclusivity, transparency, and fair representation across regions and within different population groups. I want to emphasize that the United Nations will not in any way be involved in composing the lists. As I have repeatedly stated, this is a Libyan solution. Our role is to support and facilitate. On Monday, January 18th, UNSMIL will call upon the political dialogue members to vote on the proposed mechanism. The vote on the mechanism will be conducted over a 24-hour period. We will announce the results on January 19th, after voting has been completed. The threshold for agreement that was agreed by the advisory committee on the selection mechanism is 63% of those who participate in the vote. If the percentage of 63% is not attained, we will conduct a second round of voting that will be held 2 days later. The required threshold for agreement for the second round is 50% plus 1 of those who participate in the vote. I think it's important to reflect and to remind everyone that what we are talking about here is a temporary, unified executive authority that will be replaced by a permanently democratically elected government chosen by the Libyan people on December 24th of this year. Our principles are unambiguous. A temporary, unified executive staffed by Libyan patriots who want to share responsibility rather than to divide the cake. This temporary executive has a clear and limited mandate, and as I said, that expires on the date that the elections are held on the 24th of December. We have set the table to decide a selection mechanism that does embody these principles. And my message to the Libyan people today is, with this breakthrough that we've seen, your patriotic and committed representatives here in the advisory committee have fulfilled, their commitment and have done so in a very admirable manner. Thanks very much, Alessandra.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and for these introductory remarks. And now I would like to ask the journalists who are connected if they would like to ask some questions or here in the room. And I recognize first the hand up of Catherine Fiancon. Catherine, you have the floor. Just let me remind you that as we have interpretation for those journalists who would like to ask their questions in Arabic, they can do so. Catherine.
Thank you so much, Alessandra, and thank you to Mrs. Williams to have taken the time to come and brief us. And as she read her notes, would it be possible to send them as soon as possible to the press, because there are very technical elements, and in order to have a perfect coverage, if we could have it as soon as possible, it would be much appreciated. Thank you so much. My question is regarding that temporary government. When is it going to start? Is it just after the election on the 19th of January? Could you please clarify the process? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine. The notes, the introductory remarks on Mrs. Williams are with us. We have checked them against delivery and we will send them as soon as possible. Stephanie.
So the vote on Monday is on the selection mechanism for the temporary executives. So if that vote passes, then there would be, a nomination period that will run several weeks. It would be my estimation. And then there would be a vote on the executive itself after that period. So look, I set a very firm deadline and timeline for this committee to meet, mindful of the circumstances on the ground and the need to move forward and fulfill the roadmap that was charted in Tunis. And this is all driving towards the holding of these elections at the end of the year, which will return decision-making to its rightful owners, and that's the Libyan people who will, ultimately decide their representation at the ballot box.
Thank you very much. The next question is from Peter Kenny. Peter, is that for Anadolu?
Yes, thank you. My name is Peter Kenny. I'm asking this question for Anadolu Ms. Williams. So does that mean that on December the 24th...
Peter, just 1 second, please. Just 1 second. I think you should listen. You can hear well. Maybe just, sorry. Just 1 second.
Okay.
Yep. You can put the volume up. Please go ahead. Sorry for that.
Okay, do you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, Ms. Williams. So on the 24th of December, is this going to be a national general election then? Can you elaborate on that, please?
Yes, indeed. So in Tunis, really the first major breakthrough on the roadmap that was charted by the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum was to set the date for national elections for December 24th of this year. That is also coincides, of course, with Libyan Independence Day. And so those are national elections that will be held on a constitutionally agreed upon basis. There is a lot of work to do, of course, with setting the electoral framework as well, and that is why it is incumbent upon the relevant institutions, to produce the framework necessary for these elections to take place. I think that the time frame is quite reasonable.
Thank you very much. Next question from Musa Assi. Musa, is that for Al Mayadeen? Can you confirm?
Oui merci Alexandra.
Vas-y.
سؤالي في اللغة العربية.
My question is, I want to clarify a basic issue. Ms. Williams, you said that the agreement or understanding that is reached today was discussed with parties of the LPDF, the Libyan, the 75. So what is the need for the voting on these proposals next Monday? And have you reached today about a final agreement about the executive? Thank you. Executive authority.
Okay, thank you very much for that very good question. So look, we are running a fully inclusive and transparent process. This advisory committee, the members were put forward through a process of nomination, and we selected based on regions. There's of course a representation of women, and I must say that the women in the advisory committee, as they have throughout this process, really played a brilliant role also in building bridges. There is a youth component in this committee as well, and the various I would say the political forces. This is an advisory committee it was always and is my pledge that we would take the proposals that they came up with back for decision in the plenary, and that's exactly what we're going to do on Monday. The members of the plenary will have the opportunity to vote on the mechanism, and that's the proper and fully inclusive way forward.
Thank you, Stephanie. Agnès Pedrero, AFP, French.
Yes, hello, good evening. Agnès Pedrero from AFP. A question on the vote on Monday. When you are talking about the plenary, could you specify which plenary, just so it's clear? And also, as we are with the pandemic in a virtual world, many things are happening in internet. Could you specify where the vote will take place? Is it specifically in Geneva or elsewhere, or will it be in a virtual way? If you could explain how this vote will take place, if it will be by secret ballots, or could you give more details? Thank you.
Thanks. That's another good question. So yeah, we are obviously very mindful of the fact that we are running this peace process during the global pandemic, which is why we have been extremely careful in deciding when to convene face-to-face meetings, like we have done so here in Geneva, and only to do so when it's absolutely necessary. We have conducted votes. Since Tunis, which was the last, and first major meeting of the LPDF over the telephone, It's a secret ballot it's run by the mission with oversight from our electoral division. So that's how we will conduct the vote on Monday as well. Secret ballot? Secret, yes.
The next question. Bonsoir Noureddine, vous avez la parole. Vous pouvez vous présenter? Well, Noureddine, sorry, the line is very bad. Maybe you could just get a little bit closer to the mic. No, we can't hear you. I'm sorry. If you want to send an email to me or to Mr. Leblanc, we can read the question for you to Mrs. Williams, but we can't hear you. Or maybe disconnect and reconnect. In the meantime, I'll give the floor to Isabel Sacco from the Spanish News Agency. Isabel?
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Alexandra. I would like to maybe to understand better how this proposal in this political track reconciles with the military and the economic track that are also being negotiating in other places in different time, maybe, because all three are part of the same big deal that you look for to get peace and prosperity again to Libya. Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you for that question. Yet the tracks are interrelated and they complement each other. And when we see movement and progress on one track, that often inspires, the desire for progress on the other tracks. And indeed, what we saw today comes after, again, some encouraging progress on the other two tracks. I'll start with, the economic track. We had an economic dialogue meeting here in Geneva last month. We brought together members of the, Libyan economic track of the Berlin process with, the institutions who on both sides of the divide, and with the sovereign institutions, the central bank in the West and the central bank in the East, and an official from the National Oil Corporation. And that, laid the groundwork for movement forward. And there had already been some very good, work that had been done, including by, the Deputy Prime Minister of the Government of National Accord and others across the divide, the Deputy Finance Minister of the interim government, as well as the Minister of Finance of the GNA, towards, building a unified budget. And they had been working with, the international financial institutions, particularly the World Bank, with some technical assistance. And then we sort of folded this in under the umbrella of Berlin. We had another meeting, a virtual meeting of this group in early January. And lo and behold, we saw last week, again, Libyans coming together on Libyan soil in Brega, in central eastern Libya. And they agreed a unified budget. That also comes on the backdrop of the first meeting of the board of the Central Bank of Libya for over 6 years. That board meeting was held in December. Decision was taken to unify the country's exchange rates. So we've seen some very good progress on the economic track. On the military track, there has been yet another exchange of detainees with the participation and really the leadership of the 5+5 Joint Military Commission, as well as the Elders Councils. And again, it's very encouraging to see that. And then we are seeing that there is progress towards opening the coastal road between Abu Ghraib and Sirte as really the first critical step in implementation of the ceasefire agreement. So what I have observed is that as Libyans, again, across the divide, with the divided institutions, with after these long years of conflict, they're building confidence amongst themselves and between each other, and that I think really also inspired the group here. The different tracks now challenge each other, and they often in their internal meetings are referring to what's happening, in the other tracks, and so they are very interrelated, and so I think again after today's forward movement here in Geneva, I expect that will translate into more progress on the other tracks.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. I see that we have 3 follow-ups, but before giving again the floor to the journalist, I would like to try again with Nureddin. Nureddin, I see you are reconnected. Let's give it a try.
Thank you, Alexandra. Good afternoon. Is it better now?
Much better. We can hear you well. Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon to you and to Madam Williams. My question is, if the proposed mechanism will gain the majority, will the mechanism become binding to everybody? If there will be any guarantee that any party will not respect will be held responsible? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that's a reference to spoilers. So look, I mean, I think the way that the vote is structured, again, is to reflect, maximum inclusivity. And the way that the process of reaching this decision today, also reflected representation across the group, and indeed more reflective of the Libyan population. Yes, I expect there will be spoilers. There will be people, seeking to obstruct. I think that they are in the minority. There is, an overwhelming desire, as we've seen, really going back to last summer, when, frankly, people took to the streets in Libya. There's been a lot of frustration over the failure to deliver basic services to the municipalities. The country is facing a sharp deterioration in infrastructure, and particularly the electrical grid, which needs, we estimate, $1 billion worth of investment urgently in order to avert total failure of the electrical grid next summer. So all of this sort of militates in favor of mending this divide, particularly in the executive and financial and sovereign institutions, and that rubs up against the vested interests, who, frankly, don't want to see change. And but I think the process that we have built here is broadly reflective of the desire of an overwhelming number of Libyans, that the country must move forward, that it must unite, that national reconciliation, that efforts to have the internally displaced and those in diaspora finally return home, that all of this work is building towards that outcome, and so I don't think that the obstructionists will prevail.
I see Moussa has a follow-up.
Oui, vous m'entendez?
Absolument. Allez-y, Moussa.
Oui. السيدة ويليامز يعني الكل يعرف
Miss Williams? Miss Williams, everybody knows how the foreign interference in the Libyan affair, including Turkey, the Gulf, Egypt, Russia, and
حماية ما يتم التفاهم عليه ما تم التفاهم عليه هنا في جنيف من كل هذه التدخلات الخارجية. هل ستسمح لك هذه الدول وكل هذه التدخلات بتطبيق التفاهمات التي تتوصل إليها الأطراف الليبية؟ وما هي يعني ماذا تقولين للدول التي تتدخل اليوم بالشأن الليبي؟ شكرا.
Well, to be
no.
I have, and the mission has found broad support for from the international community for the roadmap that was charted in Tunis, for this entire political process that was enshrined in UN Security Council Resolution 2510. You know, the message to them is listen to the Libyans. Listen to and respect the decisions that they have taken, and follow the lead of the Libyans, and that's really across all of the tracks, military and now political.
Peter, you also had a follow-up.
Yes, I suspect it was similar to Musa's question, and it was about Ms. Williams. You said that this is a Libyan-led initiative, and does it have the backing of the big powers that have been involved in this conflict? You know, because that is also important for the people who are involved internally in solving a conflict to have that sort of backing, because that sort of backing, I think, gets those conflicts resolved.
I guess that's ultimately a question you should pose to, you know, in those capitals. But what I have seen, what I have observed, and I've had direct contact. We have this, you know, the Berlin process of the countries and the regional organizations, along with the UN. It's almost been a year since the Berlin conference, and we come together on a regular basis. And of course, there are the reports to the Security Council. And what I can say is that we have received the requested support. The countries and the regional organizations that are part of the Berlin process participate in the international working groups that come under the umbrella of Berlin. We've seen some very good interaction between these working groups and the Libyan tracks. We've seen that on the economics file in particular. There were representatives from the co-chairs of the Economic Working Group that participated in the meeting here in Geneva and in the virtual session that we held earlier this month. You know, this of course increases the buy-in from the international community. It solidifies it, and it also gives confidence to the Libyans.
Thank you very much. And finally, a follow-up from Isabel Sacco.
Yes, thank you. It's now that you are seeing meaningful breakthroughs, but all of them are fragile and depending of the security situation in Libya on the field. Could you tell us if you have discussed the possibility of international observers to observe of the ceasefire in Libya?
You know, yes, indeed, the Secretary General at the end of the last year delivered a report to the Security Council, and this is responding, you know, to the Libyan request for the deployment of civilian international observers. And so that is something that we are working through, both on the New York end and in continued discussions with the 5+5. The good thing is there is calm on the ground in Libya, and that certainly has helped the peace process. We reflect back to when we were here last February, and bombs were falling on Tripoli, and it was hard to have talks in that atmosphere. The talks are really greatly assisted when the guns are silent, and for that I commend the Libyan parties. It is all very fragile, of course, and that is why we are moving forward to consolidate the gains, to unite the institutions, to start to really genuinely address the underlying drivers of this conflict, and to put Libya on a path to stability and prosperity.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. This concludes the list of people that wanted to ask you questions. I would like to take this opportunity to thank very much Mrs. Williams, our acting special representative of the Secretary General for Libya, because every time that we have had the great pleasure to have the talks on the Libya situation, whether military, political, economic, she has been with us. It's been a great pleasure to work with her, and also to have her every time briefing the Geneva press corps. So thank you very much, Stephanie, for this.
Thank you, Alessandra, and I want to thank the UN office in Geneva for all of the wonderful assistance in these extraordinary times, as well as, of course, the government of Switzerland, without whom none of this could have been possible. They jumped through amazing hoops to bring the Libyan participants here and to make these talks possible. Thank you very much.
Thanks to you and your team, Stephanie. Thanks to all the journalists who have followed us this Saturday evening, and happy Sunday to everybody. Thank you.